and to the republic, which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Whitney, is the camera, this all up and running?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic. A lot of things happening. So for those of you who may not realize this, we have two members who are remote tonight. So we do have a quorum in person, we have two remote members. And so that does mean that any votes that are happening this evening will be through roll call. And so Zach and Andy, if you can hear that, we are going to be doing roll call votes for the evening. All right, so starting off with the minutes, November the 3rd, what's the wish of the board?
Move it.
Second?
A motion and a second. Any comments or changes? All right, all those in favor? Well, actually, we got to do roll call, so we'll start with Gigi. Aye. Jeff?
Aye.
Zach? Andy?
Aye.
Oh, all right.
It's got a whole lot of them.
All right, and aye. So that is, yes. All right, so on to meeting business. We're going to start with public comments. And if anybody would like to share public comments this evening, please do so. Like last meeting, we're going to stick with a 3-minute time limit. But please feel free to come up and speak with us.
Hi, I'm Bobby Ann. I live on Brown Road. On November 3rd, Zach suggested sharing all of the emails that the board receives at each meeting so that they can become part of our public records. This is a very wise suggestion because they're in fact all public documents. Many other New Hampshire schools are already doing this, and they include their emails in all of their meeting minutes so that nothing is lost or forgotten. As I mentioned before, I emailed the board about a topic that you needed help with back on October 22nd, and I never heard back. I'm aware that the New Hampshire School Board Association strongly advises you all never to communicate with civilians via email. How do you expect to address or resolve any community concerns if you ignore our emails and also refuse to talk to us at board meetings? In order to avoid hundreds of right-to-know requests, it would behoove you to vote on this issue tonight if you can, remoting in. Moving on, our COVID cases have skyrocketed in DCS, even though you mandate masks. And this was months ago that we started wearing them. If masks work, why is everyone still getting sick? You force our children to wear these ineffective face coverings with blatant physical evidence of their shortcomings. It is cold and flu season. Instead of breathing freely and letting our children's immune systems do what they're supposed to do, you're forcing them to wear bacteria-filled muzzles all day long just to receive their tax-paid public education. I find it funny that you denied our petition special meetings, stating you were concerned that it would cost the community too much. Yet, you're using our tax dollars to pay a law firm thousands of dollars to fight our civil case that will force you to hold said meeting. How much are you paying Wadley, Starr, and Peters exactly? I can assure you that we know our rights and we know how legislation works. Your motion to dismiss our case is only a minor setback, and we still have our evidentiary hearing next week. Instead of wasting more tax dollars and time, consider listening to the community and end this at once. I have here a right-to-know request that is asking you to convey and let everybody know in the community how much you've been paying these lawyers since 2016, as well as the estimated portion of our budget that's going to go to them till the end of this school year in June. I also would like to know in this right-to-know request per RSA 91A, all of your emails regarding the Deerfield Community Schools mask mandate and any correspondence with face coverings involved in the emails from every board member. This is for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Greg Whitmore, North Road. I have less to say, so I can say it more slowly this week. It's 2.5 months with an abusive mask policy, and Now everybody's worried about cases at school. I see the email coming out and it says, everybody's emailing me, we want to know what are we doing to protect the children? So we placate them with nonsense like we're doing a deep cleaning, which is clearly has been shown to be completely ineffective, and it's just to make people feel better, but it doesn't do anything. I mean, we know that. And I can hear it now, we absolutely have to have masks now, right? But we absolutely had to have them when we had 0 cases too, right? Let's put this in perspective. There are a shocking 60 cases in Deerfield right now. It's double. There were 30. You know, 30 is 0.007% of the population of Deerfield, and 60 is 0.01%. It's statistically insignificant. It's a literal drop in the bucket, but we're in a panic because of it. I mean, the masks, they're not very effective at stopping the spread, are they? I mean, it's pretty clear. You would think that in the last 18 months, a concise government study proving beyond a doubt the efficiency of mask use would have come out, but it hasn't, and there's a very obvious reason for that. It's not a difficult study, to say the least. Later in the agenda, you're having a mask matrix update. Why bother? You haven't followed it from day one. I mean, just scratch it from the agenda. It's a waste of time, right? Now, last month, you said, let's see, masks would be in place until the vaccine is available for ages 5 to 11. And boy, is that going to be a fun meeting when that second dose has been administered to these 5 and 11-year-olds, and we all come here to call your bluff and see what you actually do. I think I can predict the future. By the way, 0 children have died in New Hampshire from COVID, but 2 have died from the vaccine. Keep that in mind. I have something, I don't expect you to take this from me. It's a pledge. I'm calling it a mask agreement. And I would like all of you to sign on for this. So it says, as a sign of solidarity with the students and staff that are forced to wear masks, I agree to wear a mask from 7 a.m. until 3:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. I will be allowed a 30-minute mask break you can take a recess, that's fine. Unless it's raining out. If it's raining out, sorry, you have to wear it during that 30-minute period. And I will be allowed a 30-minute mask break for my lunch. If I am inclined to exercise indoors during these hours, I will wear my mask. Now, 2.5 months, I don't know what any of you do during the day, I don't care. But I don't know if you've been wearing your masks along with the children. So I want to make sure that it's extended for the same amount of time afterwards. Okay, so if you would all agree to this, that would be great, because I really want you to know what these kids feel on a daily basis. And I'm guessing that not all of you do that. All right, so please make sure you wear your mask, 7:30 to 3:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. And just report back to me if you've been doing it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a good day. I will, just one more thing. Smartest thing I've heard in the last 18 months. Humans are the only animals stupid enough to restrict their own breathing. Isn't that an interesting thought? We're the only things I've even considered.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good one.
Have a good one. Any other public comment? All right, moving on to the agenda, our next item is agenda review. Any changes to the agenda, what do you think?
I have one.
Okay.
We have Dale transportation invoices to review, if we could do those under consent agenda 4C.
Okay. Any others? All right. Okay, on to consent agendas, and, consent agenda, we'll look at one item, which is the transportation.
Those are in your drive for, there were 2 of them dated October 31st. One was for $31,671 and one was for $14,437.03.
What is the wish of the board?
Go ahead and authorize the payment.
A second?
Do we have to have a motion on that?
Give me a motion.
Okay, yep, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So it looks like in the first one, we've got, this is on day 1031, a different, 8 days for the 4 buses and 10 days for the 6 buses? Is that Concord versus Deerfield having different school schedules?
No, we had 4 buses and then went up to 6 buses.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's just when we added drivers.
okay,
And then the other invoice is for the 2 Concord High buses.
gotcha.
So the invoicing all appears to be accurate, Nate, based upon when they activated the 2 other buses for us.
Okay, that makes sense. Any concerns? All right, we'll go with a roll call then. Gigi?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Zach?
Aye.
Andy? I think you're muted.
Aye.
Aye, all right, and aye for me. All right, thank you. All right, 4D, review of correspondence. So we had a couple emails coming in, and I would say we can revisit this question of what we do with the correspondence. I think if we want to pick that up during this meeting, we have a policy that is coming up for communication. We tabled that for this one now, but I think maybe that conversation we wait until we have the whole board present. But anyway, the review of correspondence, the 2 emails that we received were that I saw were again consistent with previous ones where they are divided. But I think that considering as a board whether we want to post them and include that as part of our minutes is something that we can come back to. Would this be the time to pick that up, or are we just waiting?
We can put it on a future agenda for conversation.
Yeah, let's put that on for next meeting, please, if that's all right.
And then, Nate, if I can just add,
Yes,
I
please.
think it's important for everybody to, at least that's watching this, we're not going to respond to questions or comments about pending litigation. So I know that there are some emails that are prompting us to respond and react in a public meeting. That's not going to happen. So I just want to continue. I don't want people to think those emails are being ignored. But the moment litigation starts, we're not going to be responding to anything in regards to that particular matter.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments, correspondence? Jeff?
Regarding correspondence, I did get 2 phone calls that I just want to share regarding the reporting of cases, in that, both were very happy with the way that we adjusted our reporting out of statistics rather than the blanket X number of cases in the school, breaking it down by grade level. And I would ask that we can continue to do that. And one question I had that I thought I would bring up was and this may not be the right time for it, but in that reporting, if it's possible, when we have positive at-homes to notify the grade level. It's not a positive PCR, but it's a, kid test positive with an at-home test, if we could make that classroom aware of that information. I don't know if this is the right
I
time.
did, yeah, I send an email to the specific classroom. You don't get notified of that because it's just a specific classroom. And then I send an email to the community at large so if there was a case in Miss Samia's class, I'll send it right to Miss Samia's class through Alma.
Yep.
And then I send one call out to the whole community.
The question was more if students out because he's had a positive at home and is waiting PCR, if we could notify the classroom, not necessarily notify the school because it's not confirmed, but just to kind of give that extra level of transparency for parents that are really wanting to keep their finger on the pulse.
I know it's an extra step, but
So you're talking about if a parent calls in and says, we did an at-home test, it was positive, we followed up with PCR.
We are taking at-home tests results.
Oh, you are, okay. Sorry.
No, that's okay. We hadn't been,
Yep.
and because of the surge, and we just needed to pivot to that. And it actually is in the toolkit that was language that was changed recently. That end of October it was changed. So yes, we are accepting at-home kits.
Gotcha.
Great. Any other correspondence to share? Okay. So moving on to the fire panel update. Where do we want to start with that? Thanks, Jeff.
So we met last Wednesday with the fire chief, assistant chief, our fire protection engineer, the architects, Zach, myself, and one of the vendors to try and understand the full situation of what's going on. So started out with what we thought was an isolated incident in the fire alarm panel. Something not, for some reason, the panel not talking to the second floor, this panel not alerting dispatch, a myriad of issues. The solution is going to be replacing the fire alarm panel, which is going to require relocating it so that we can keep the building online while we relocate the panel, and we don't have to have the building unprotected for a few days. In touching the panel, we now need to bring the building up to modern code because we're changing part of the system. We had been grandfathered in. So it's kind of a three-phase process. There's phase one, which is getting the new panel, installing that, and making the switch over. Then we're going to work with the fire protection engineer to put together an RFP to look at all the deficiencies in a 30-year-old system. For example, our horn strobes are not synchronized, so somebody with epilepsy is at risk of having a seizure because, you know, we've got strobes flashing at different frequencies. So the fire protection engineer and the chief were throwing out terms that were way over my head, but long story short, we had every stakeholder in the room. We've come up with that solution, so they're gonna be designing a new system for the school that meets current code, voice evac and everything like that. The phase one work is going to be completed November 30th, so we'll hopefully be able to be off fire watch by then. And then we'll be putting out the RFP for the new work, and soliciting bids for all of that for the upgrades. Obviously, you know, the pipe dream had been to, you know, tie this all to the addition, but that's such a long timeline and this needs to be addressed more quickly. So they're gonna try and design the system to be as flexible as we can, so if we relocate any walls, things like that in this, everything will be ceiling mounted, devices can be reused and installed in a new application. So off fire watch hopefully November 30th, and then we'll be moving forward with creating the RFP for the new system. And the chief is on board with that.
And is there an approximate timeline once the RFP goes out? Any idea how to predict how long the work would take?
No.
I think that would be a summer project, Nate, just
Okay.
because it's gonna involve dropping ceiling tiles and working through all the hallways and into the classrooms and everything else. So I think the objective with that would be to get everything lined up so that we can get started on it as soon as the building's empty for the summer.
But in the meantime, we'll be functional, we'll be safe, our kids will be safe here because we will have switched over to the.
Yeah, the new panel will be working with the existing devices, and everything, once the new panel's installed, everything will be retested, to make sure it's, working properly. And, the chief was comfortable with that, plan. So it would be a new panel, a new control panel with the existing devices. And then we will, basically update and swap out the devices with all the new gizmos, when we hit summertime.
Okay, great. Since we're on the topic, I think how we're gonna pay for this is worth bringing up. I know that we are, we're going to be putting this into the, Zach, can you talk about what the process is for okaying these funds? Because it's gonna be more than the $10,000 that we okayed last meeting, right?
So, what we're doing, or what I'd like to do is, we've had money set aside for this in the, one of the trust funds. And so once the work's complete, we'll have a public hearing, and then, if the board decides they want to pull the money out of the trust fund, we'll have a public hearing, and then, go ahead and take it out of that.
Okay.
And, I guess, Nate, would be a good question for you, if that's what how the board wants to handle this. We have the, facilities, I don't want to use the wrong term, but the facilities repair. Amber, which fund was it, the larger fund we have? And maybe you have the balance on that as well, Amber, just for the board's benefit.
Facility repair is at $343,239.
So that's where I'd like to take it from. If the board's comfortable with that, we can schedule a public hearing after the work is done on phase one.
Just a sense of the board, does that seem okay as a plan for paying for this?
Yeah, seems like a totally adequate spot.
Yeah, okay. Jeff, I'm sorry, Andy, okay?
Yep, good for me.
Okay, great. All right, fantastic, sounds good. Anything else you need from us at the moment, or not you, but does the situation need anything else for us to?
No, we will need to get approval, so I should say there is a cost incurred with the RFP work and creation and that design, so we'll need the board to approve a change order for that design work and everything, but we were hoping to have those numbers sooner, but probably won't be till tomorrow or Friday that we'll see what that's gonna cost to get the RFP created by our fire protection engineer.
Okay.
But we'll take that up. We
And
are at a safe enough spot with getting phase one done that we can handle that at the next meeting.
Yeah, so our next meeting is the 1st, which is right after we switch over, so at that point, that'll be okay to do the RFP, is the 1st of November or December?
Yeah, we have to keep moving on it, but it's not a crashing rush.
Yes, okay, great. All right, anything else about the fire panel? Great, thank you for all the meetings about that. Okay, on to continuing business number 5, board reports, PTO update.
Hi.
Hi.
Can I go there?
Sure, please.
So we wrapped up a couple of fall things. We did our pet photo contest. That was a whole lot of fun. We had a lot of entries. I think it was really fun to see everyone's creativity in there and cute little animals. And we had a whole variety of hamsters and rats and dogs and even a horse. So that was a really big success. We were happy about that. We also did our scarecrow contest. So hopefully some of you got to see the scarecrows that were on display for a while. There's one lonely display that's gonna get taken down really soon. But again, that was really fun. People are very creative and we really enjoy doing those events. On conference day, we were able to treat the teachers to a nice breakfast. So hopefully they all enjoyed that. And on the horizon, we have some more fun stuff planned. We're looking to do something in the winter similar to our pet photo contest. We wanna do something probably like a snowman photo contest that we can judge online. I think that was really successful. And we just wrapped up our catalog fundraiser too, and that was also a huge success, so we're really grateful for everyone's support. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so the next item is the executive board, and the report for that, that happened last week, we did meet, there were just the 2 items basically of significance. One was the transportation RFP overhaul that we've been sort of talking about. We haven't heard or seen a draft from
Correct.
Dean yet. So the question was put back to, if you remember from the full SAU board meeting, the question was put back to the individual districts as to how they wanted to proceed, since all of us are in the same RFP year?
Not Chichester.
Okay, but all 4 of the other 4 of us
Others,
are
yep,
gonna
yep.
be. So we're all in the same year where we're looking at a new contract potentially. So this is with all 4 of us do use Dale, right?
Yes.
And so that is the conversation that's happening at the full SAU board level, and so at the exec board level, we were waiting to hear back from individual boards. We did not have a lot of feedback yet, but they are taking it back to the individual. At least this is the place to talk about contract. So that was one item. The other item was just that we talked about something that our board and the SAU board hasn't done a lot of recently, but we've been talking about it here and there, is the idea of establishing goals for our superintendents, and also an assessment process where we can start to provide feedback and think about, again, what a goal for our individual board would be, but also then how to provide feedback to our superintendent. So that's a conversation that will be continuing, but we started that at the SAU exec board level. Questions? All right. Next item is the principal's report. Ms.
Yeah.
Whitting.
Sure. So this covers October 21st through today, November 17th. The last board meeting, we skipped over the principal's report for an abundance of saving some time. So congratulations to our boys soccer team. Our boys soccer team finished in 3rd place and made it to the playoffs this year, which they were very excited about and proud of themselves about. And our cross-country middle school state invitationals happened during this period of time on a Saturday, and our school represented very well. We celebrated Red Ribbon Week. I know that seems like forever ago, but the kids showed a ton of school spirit during that week, and we talked about being healthy and making healthy choices throughout the course of the week. So we had a school university collaborative meeting a couple weeks ago to discuss the UNH interns, believe it or not, for the 2022-2023 school year. We're currently in a little bit of a crisis with UNH. They are down interns. They have a significant low number this year, and so UNH is actually looking at kind of clustering their schools because they start spreading them out everywhere. So we're in the process of waiting to hear about that information. Mr. Grieve and I have been enjoying the classrooms of the week. We were able to visit with Mrs. Loopy's class. Miss Loopy had her baby, little Theo was born end of October, and Mrs. Kesner, who is Miss Patrick Wynn, the 7th grade ELA teacher, and Miss Laskowski's class was class of the week a couple weeks ago. And I did Miss Flanagan's homeroom and advisory last week, and Mr. Grieve is visiting with Mrs. Cook's class this week. So those have been the classes of the week over the last couple of weeks. We had a middle school dance, which was very successful, and held it right outside here. The kids had a lot of fun. Our 1st graders went on a field trip to Squam Lake on Monday, November 1st, and we had parent-teacher conferences virtually. We're very hopeful that we can offer them in person in the spring, but we'll probably keep a virtual option as that has become pretty popular with a lot of families. A thank you to our PTO, as mentioned. They provided some delicious treats on Parent-Teacher Conference Day, and teachers were able to stop down to the lobby, get a treat, and head back to a conference throughout the course of the day. On Friday, November 5th, our 8th graders took a field trip to Brown Center at UNH and had a wonderful team building day there. They did ropes courses and really pushed the boundaries of we certainly have an 8th grader here who could probably speak a little bit about it. Was it fun?
No.
No! Was it cold?
Yes.
It was cold, yeah. Did you have to push yourself a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Up a little bit out of the comfort zone. On Monday, November 8th, the 8th grade team held the Zero Hero recognition. They're trying to recognize students who have been zero heroes over the course of a month, as well as students who have gone above and beyond in other areas, reached for a 4 on a summative and that type of thing. So they had a little recognition celebration on that last Monday. Chris Motika has been visiting this week. He was with 6th and 7th grade on Tuesday. He'll be here tomorrow to work with 8th grade. We are shifting a little bit our focus. We have kind of had a focus of what each month would be. And I'll talk a little bit more about this the next time we are able to work it out a little bit more. But in working with the teams, we're shifting our focus a little bit more towards building the culture of the middle school team. So we'll incorporate the work that Chris and the administration and the board are looking for our middle school team to do, but our focus will take a little bit of a turn, and I'll fill you in more when I have more information. It's a new development. So today the SAU leadership team met at Chichester Central School. We're starting our ESSER 3 work. So we have a 3rd bucket of ESSER money that we're we're all scrambling to figure out what's the best way to address learning loss and social emotional learning with students, as well as addressing social emotional needs for school building staff members and that type of thing. So among many other things. And so we've been doing a lot of work around that. We sent out a stakeholder survey that hopefully you received. So we're looking for feedback from the community of what are some areas that you feel would be behoove us to spend our money on. I think that a huge amount of people are the biggest focus right now is addressing learning loss and social emotional needs of students. So we'll be taking a look as an SAU as to how we can address those two particular areas. Today for Professional Development Wednesday, we'll talk a little bit more on the next agenda item, but we did a good number of staff members met with the architects through a Google Meet to review the options that were presented a couple weeks ago at the school board meeting and get feedback from staff. It was very helpful for our staff to give some feedback as to what they would like to see happening at the school. I think that is everything. So, any questions?
The recent sort of spike in the COVID numbers we already talked about a little bit, but can you just speak to some of the changes in the building that have been happening as a result since the meeting 2 weeks ago?
Sure. So we've moved our lunch situation. We had, 2 grade levels in the cafeteria at a time. We have our kindergartners, because they're our youngest dragons, so they're in here during lunchtime, spread out through the whole cafeteria. Our 3rd grade is, as you know, one of our biggest grades, and our 7th grade is one of our biggest grades. So we kept kindergarten, 3rd, and 7th in the cafeteria, and the other grade levels are eating in their classrooms. So that is one of the changes we made. A lot of teachers did have students 3 feet physically distanced. We've asked them to do at least 3 feet or more if they're able to. So teachers kind of redesigned their rooms a little bit. They're more careful bringing kids over to the carpet, spreading out arm's length. Our cleaning measures that we've been using have continued on. We have, every classroom has the blue cloths that they are able to wipe down surfaces. We're cleaning high touch point areas, spraying at night, so those measures still have continued. And I have them all listed off, but those are just some things that come to mind in terms of major changes that we've made. Cohorting.
I was just gonna say, cohorting. We were rolling with our win block, what I need block, where, our kids were switching classrooms and working with small groups, and this group needed work on place value, and this group was working on basic, and so we had them all divided out into what their needs are, and we did have to go back to cohorting our groups, so there's no more switching classes right now. Our special ed staff and our interventionists are not combining classrooms to work with kids together. That was a huge one that we put into place. I think that's
Okay. And all of the data that we're getting, that we're making these decisions based on, is all self-reporting from families that are coming through either the self-test we were talking about before, or reporting from PCR results from like a CVS or something. Is that a fair statement? I mean, as opposed to we're not doing any tests in the building. We're not able to do that.
not yet,
So it's all we're just waiting to hear from parents.
correct.
So there could be students out there who aren't getting tested or who don't know, but it could be positive. We just don't have that information.
Correct.
Sorry, Karen.
No, I was just gonna ask either Patty or Kristen. I noticed in the toolkit that it talked about that there was an organization, is it SAS?
SS, yep.
Yep, and have they, and it did talk at one point about being able to maybe assist with testing, but it would, the wording was kind of fuzzy. It said if there was like a if available, or if appropriate or something like that. So I didn't know what that meant, and if in fact they have been reached out to, and is that something we should do, or do we feel like
we're capping it and
I'll let Kristen speak to her conversations with Bonnie, but we did share that with Bonnie. I think at the moment she's pretty overwhelmed, but we shared that that was a conversation, you know, and other nurses in our SAU did begin doing it at the beginning of the year. The thing that we have found is a shortage of tests. You know, when they first went, one of the reps from Hamburg, one of the nurses went and they gave out a couple hundred BINAPS cards, and then they went back and then they don't have the volume that they had before, so now it's harder to get the tests. So it's, you know, it's a supply issue at the moment, but it's something that we've shared with Bonnie that we would love to be able to offer here at DCS. So she is planning to look into it.
awesome.
You have to have a doctor sign off and willing to sort of be the supervisor of the program.
Right,
So it will take a little bit of legwork, and we have to see if they're restocked yet.
okay. What, you guys will let us know if there's anything that we can do to facilitate that.
Sure. Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I guess the only question I have is, what's our plan going forward as far as continuing? It looks like, you know, watching the trends, it looks like we're on the downward trend if everyone's reporting and we're getting the accurate results. Is our plan to keep these measures in place for throughout the winter? You know, kind of, it came out of nowhere and was like, holy cow, here we go. What is the conversation? What are the conversations being had about steps, you know, a week from now, 2 weeks from now after Thanksgiving?
Right. Well, I don't think anything's, we need to get through Thanksgiving. I mean, I think this is what we're seeing as Halloween.
Yep.
And so once Thanksgiving and Christmas come, it might happen again. We might see a surge. We are in touch with the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services every single day. Bonnie has her connection. Patty and I have sat on conference calls with him. You know, we'll continue these measures until we start to see a decline in our numbers again.
So let's say, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Let's say, you know, the rest of this week and next week we stay at 0, you know, after Thanksgiving, even though we're still at 0, I would assume we're gonna keep these measures in place until we're back a week or two after Thanksgiving, so that we, you know. So it sounds like what you're saying is the plan's kind of keep it for at least through mid-December, that we're gonna keep this lunch in the classrooms?
Yeah, we won't switch back anytime soon.
Yeah.
Probably wait until after the new year, see what the new year brings, see if we're gonna stick with the mask mandate or not, and go from there.
Zach or Andy, anything? One last question, I think that I've sort of heard through the grapevine, but maybe a more definitive answer if you can give it. If, let's say after Thanksgiving, the numbers spike even further and we have more faculty members involved, et cetera, and it looks pretty dire and we have people, we have an actual shortage in the building, is going back to remote a possibility, a likelihood? What is the statement on that?
The statement is that the governor lifted the emergency order. There is no more remote option. We will not pivot to remote. Patty sent an email to her superintendent group last week, polling every single superintendent in the Lakes region, and nobody has. If we go to remote, it will be on a case-by-case basis. Maybe second grade or a particular grade level, if they have an increase in numbers, we'll go remote for a day or two, but we'll be put right back at school. It is not something, we will not do what happened in March of 2020, and will not be offering a remote option like we did last year. With the governor really removing the remote, the emergency order, 100%, we need to provide 100% instruction in school. So what that will mean is if we do offer a remote option, we still have to, any parent or family that would like to send their child to school still has that option. So we would have remote going on and students in school. So it would be very tricky. It would be a very tricky situation.
Have you reached close to the point where teachers are sick? I mean, not even just with COVID, with other sort of winter sicknesses, where we don't have enough faculty to staff the building?
It's challenging, but we have figured it out.
Okay. Fantastic.
Even if Mrs. Withy has to sub in first grade. Trish has done music. You know, I mean, we do what we have to do here, for sure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
One question I have, and you might be able to speak to this, Patty, but, you know, I know that Raymond, I believe it was Raymond High School had, you know, extreme surge in cases, and I believe they went remote. Did they just basically say, we're gonna ignore what the governor has said and the Commissioner of Education, and made that decision unilaterally?
I don't have an answer to that. They're not part of our region.
Yeah.
And I had no consultation. I've not heard anything from anyone about that situation, other than I heard about it from just people talking about it, but I don't know what they did, why they did it, how they did it. You know, like I said, with our region probably has 15 or so SAUs in it, and the most people did was maybe go remote. One person had 60 cases, so one grade level was remote for 2 days, and they still had 2 students in the classroom. So parents that wanted to send their students, so the teacher was remote with the students, and those 2 students were in the classroom. So it's been made very clear that there's no going remote. And in extreme cases, you can work with the commissioner and DHHS and maybe get on the same page about, okay, we're gonna be remote with, you know, Mrs. Smith's 2nd grade class for 2 days, and that's as far as it's gone. So I don't know what other people have done, only the people in our region.
I will add too that in our conversations with the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services, they have not recommended that we go remote, nor are they say in the business of recommending that anymore. So they will not be making that recommendation. That is a school-based decision, and they will not be part of that decision-making anymore. So they've gone on record as saying that, so I'm just making that a very public comment as well.
They have not been given the authority to do it. And we haven't been given the authority to go remote. So.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Nate, can I just add that, and this is just my own perspective on this whole matter, but it's frustrating for me sitting on this end of the equation, where a year ago they would have had us, if we had an outbreak like we've experienced in the last 2 weeks, they would have had us wrap the building in plastics and everybody home, sterilize, bleach, and tear through that building, cleaning every nook and cranny. And now basically they've eliminated the most practical tool we can to stop an outbreak dead in its tracks. So I certainly last Wednesday would have said go remote until Thanksgiving to give that building a chance, in the cases a chance to die off. Certainly frustrating that the governor and the Department of Ed and DHHS have continually said that it's local decision, but they don't actually give the local decision to the individual boards. That's all.
Thanks, Zach. All right, anything else? Principal's report, questions? All right, thank you. Curriculum Review Board.
There's no meeting, and the next meeting is December 13th.
Ms. Withy, did you allude that you were going to say something as part of that, or?
CRB.
I think she meant building expansion when
Yes,
she said the next.
I did say next on the agenda, but no,
Skip that
I meant
one. All right,
thank
then on
you.
to Building Expansion Committee, Mr. Keller.
Okay, so we continue to make progress. The committee met this afternoon to review progress on 2 fronts. One, the RFPs and the selection of a construction management firm. That is something that I have, just so you know, excluded myself from. It will not be participating in to avoid any conflict of interest. So Zach will be stepping in to my shoes for that part of it. But I can tell you there were 9 firms that were there. 2 of them have backed out just because the current workload that they have. So it looks like we'll have 7 firms responding to RFP for pre-bond construction management services. So that process will be occurring in the next couple of weeks. Their proposals are due right after Thanksgiving. The committee and Zach will review those and set up interviews, meet with them, and select a firm to help us really hammer into kind of what that cost is for the options that we're selecting. We are at the point where we need to make a decision on which option we're gonna go with. We were able to eliminate option one, which was presented to the community at the previous meeting, kind of from the straw poll, didn't really have a lot of support, and that's been kind of the direction with that one. So option one's been eliminated, we're now looking at options 2 and 4, which have been relabeled options A and B. And I think the conclusion that we've kind of come to is we're on a very tight timeline, we have been from day one on this, and we need to get a decision about which way we're gonna go. And we realize there's no Cinderella slipper that's gonna be the perfect, crystal clear, golden light shining around it, yeah, this is the one. It's gonna come down to making a decision of what is the best option for Deerfield that's gonna give us the room we need for the next 30 years of growth, so we're not back here 10 years from now looking at this again. But also balancing that with the cost of it, right? Option B is a larger facility. Option A is a slightly smaller facility, but it has the ability to have future expansion if we need it. So the committee is gonna solicit staff feedback between now and right around the end of Thanksgiving. Let the staff weigh in, get their input on it, and then come to a decision, probably December 1st, whenever our next board meeting is, we'll meet before that and hammer it out. So that will allow LBA to really proceed with their, further distilling of the plan. Other than that, it's gonna be tight. I mean, we're gonna be late December, early January when we get a price tag for this that we're gonna have to bring to the MBC. And we've known this all along, but now it's like when you're, okay, we really gotta keep moving forward here. So I know a lot of people in the community are gonna wanna know what's it gonna cost. Unfortunately, that's not an answer that we're gonna be able to have a number that we can take and say this is what we need a bond for until right up to the 11th hour, which is gonna be unpalatable for some people. It's just the reality of it. We wanna keep moving this forward so we can get rid of those modulars and make this happen this year. Otherwise, we're losing an entire another year. So just want everyone to know that it is gonna be tight, but it's the fastest we can go. And that's it.
Has there been any further look or any more information about getting potential support from the state? I know that there's state building aid, there has been in the past.
So that
In the
won't
recent
be,
past.
we can't go into the bond with that. If next year there's building aid available, great, and we're gonna apply for it and try to get it. But we have to look at it as though it's going to be 100% funded through taxpayers. And that would be a great plus if we were able to get it, but for now, everyone should just assume that that's not an option.
So then, it sounds like the process is gonna sort of create the cost, that we're gonna see the price tag in the end based on what we're trying to do. We're not sort of going backwards, or we're gonna try to set a cap for the price, and then we'll try to fit our plans into the price.
No, exactly, you're correct. So we will be able to make small modifications and, up until we have a complete, 100-page set of plans saying this is what we're building. After that bond vote, we could move this wall, move that wall, those type of things. But as far as increasing square footage, not likely unless material costs drop by 30% and suddenly we've got, more money available, but.
I was just gonna say, in terms of like moving forward, it hasn't been like, no one's sitting around dragging their feet on it. It's just that once we started the processes take a while. So we knew that the timeline would be pretty tight from the beginning. And I think that the other important piece is like, once we get down to like one concept where we can get a much better idea and the construction managers are on board and can also give us an idea of a more exact cost, then we'll have much more, community input, more, I think of the word I'm trying to say. That we'll be able to lay out more information to the community so that they can see what's happening and then give more input than the meeting that we had one meeting already.
Sounds good. Zach, Andy, any questions?
No.
Regarding the NBC, I assume they're aware at this point, you've had a couple meetings so far this season, are you keeping them up to speed with the fact that we're gonna be sort of dropping this in their laps at the 11th hour?
So I have reminded the NBC that this is coming. I believe at every single meeting, so they know that this is coming down the pipe. And as I've told them, when we have it ready, we're gonna be there talking to them about it. But until then, it updates at every meeting that I'm at.
Okay.
And on that note, one thing, just because obviously the NBC is gonna be very interested, one of the things, I'd ask Zach to do is if, in the next few weeks, if the NBC would be willing to sit down with, any of the members of the, at one of their meetings, have the building expansion committee come and present to them as much information as we can. Obviously, ultimately, they care about that dollar amount, but there's all the back end that adds up to that dollar amount that we are getting closer and closer to where we can present to them. Whether it's the, existing facility study, the deficiencies we're dealing with here, to the proposed options, and begin laying that groundwork so that it's not a total and complete surprise to them. Try to get them as much information as we can, knowing they really just, ultimately need that dollar amount.
Yeah, great. All right, thank you. On to high school options. So Zach and I, as the representatives on this subcommittee, we have met with another school. We've met with Concord. We've also met with another school. Can we get into the detail?
Yeah.
So we met, not detail, but we met with Co-Brown, and so we've met with a couple schools. We are still considering in the future meeting with additional schools, but at the moment where we are in our negotiations is still relatively early. Just sort of recognizing that, like Zach was saying earlier, once litigation begins, we can't say much about it. We can't say much about negotiations once we're in the middle of them, other than we are meeting and we're brainstorming and working back and forth, and so we'll update people when we have information to update. But at the moment, there's nothing really to say, other than we are talking to multiple schools. Questions? Probably can't really talk about it very much. All right. NBC updates. Zach and Andy.
So the NBC season is in swing. They're currently on the town's budget. They had a meeting last night. I wasn't able to attend. I'm going to be. I should be able to make the meeting next Tuesday, so I will be there for that. But my understanding is they started the work on the town side last night. And that's about it.
All right. Any last questions? Sounds like that brings us to our budget.
All right. So I've attacked this the same way I have in previous years. Anything that's changed since the last meeting will be in yellow. I know the last meeting that you went through the individual lines, everything basically that wasn't salary or benefits. Thank you for your willingness to take that approach. I truly appreciate it. As you all know, our schedule has been really crazy with short staff at our office, so I appreciate your patience as we work through this. It really helped, and I hope that it gave you a new way to look at it too. When Patty and I were talking about it, we thought it was a great approach to really see the meat of the budget rather than just the bottom line, and kind of work out and then in. So I'll just go through page by page, let you know what changes have happened on each page, and then we can kind of go from there. I also have other documents that are within this packet as well that support the inner workings of the budget. So on the first page, on page 3, I've added in the teacher's salary, paraprofessional salaries, and Title I salary. Those are on the lines between 14 and 21. I have updated the high school tuition number. We received our amounts for Co-Brown, so that's been updated. We also received an update in student population over at Concord High School, so that's been updated as well. So the new amount has been reflected. There are no changes on page 4. On page 5, there was a change on line 108 per the request of the Principal Livy. So that has been changed. On page 6, I have added in special ed teachers, the paraprofessional, special ed secretary, and sped coordinator. The other thing I did is if I change any of the verbiage, the notes that are underneath the lines that are over on the left, I've also coded those yellow so that you know what lines have changed as well. On page 7, we had a change in co-curricular officials, which is on line 162. So that change has been reflected. We do have the document in this packet that outlines all the co-curriculars. The backup is within your packet tonight. On page 8, I have added in the guidance counselor salary and the nurse's salary. That's the change that occurred there. On page 9, I've added in the library salaries, which are on lines 215 and 216. On page 10, on line 248, Patty had brought to my attention that something looked a little funky in regards to the school board secretary salary because there was no actual listed. It was there, but when I data entry the information, it was in your last packet that $1,860 was reflected on line 247 under board salaries, so it just needed to be moved down a line. So I've made that change to reflect the correct placement. In our information system, our finance system, it is correctly billed to the right line. I just data entered it into the wrong line here. On line 263, attorney line, I know there was some discussion on whether there was enough amount that was originally budgeted, so I increased that line. And obviously, if you want to have more further discussion on whether you feel that's appropriate or not, we can have that discussion. But to add a few more dollars in there for anything that you could foresee coming forward. On page 11, I've added in the salaries for principal, assistant principal, and secretary salaries. On page 12, I've added in the custodial salaries. That's on line 312. On page 13, I've added in the health insurance. These are the figures from our healthcare provider. The rates are significantly high. It's coming in at 9.9% increase. What I will tell you is, when we've gone out to look at other vendors, nobody will even consider us because they said that our rates are so much lower than what they can even offer us. And we reached out to a couple vendors to have that discussion. A lot of it is.
So are those,
go ahead, sorry, Zach.
are those the actual increases or are those estimated?
Nope, those are actual increases. And you'll notice that in your particular lines, you don't have an increase in your budget, but that's because of personnel changes.
Okay.
Okay, so you're not seeing a significant increase in those particular areas, but there is a significant increase in the rate, if that makes sense. So you've had plan changes and you've had personnel changes that would, that's what's reflected there. Dental insurance did decrease by 3%, so there is a savings there. And then on page 14, we have, I've added in all of the other benefits like retirement, annuities, unemployment, workers' comp. Those are in there, as well as, I have not put in the separation of benefits, so any retirements are not in here yet. So that's not been included.
Quick question.
On the retirement, Amber, was
Yep.
there a change in the state's rate this year, or did it stay static?
Nope, it's still that 2102 for the certified and 1406 for non-certified.
That was my question, that's
All
the
right.
same?
That stayed the same for next year, yep.
It was a big jump this year.
Budgeted is, well, I'm looking at the default number from last year, but we're down considerably from the default number. Was that due to staff changes and just pay rate?
In retirement, well, we have some FTE, we have a decrease in FTE, so that's gonna cause some of it. So like, for instance, if you were to go back up to the para salaries, we had budgeted, I think it was 26 or 28 the previous year, and we have 24 budget, or 28 or so for this year, and we only are budgeting for 24 next year. So those kind of changes will reflect in a reduction in these lines.
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second? And this has been populated today, so on Friday morning, we're gonna come back as an administrative team and take the new rosters with the new budget and just go through them one more time. So usually we have time to review this ahead of time, and we didn't. We may have to come back in 2 weeks with changes, but as of right now, this is where we stand.
You mean you may come back and add it back up to 26 or something?
I need to verify with Lisa, did we put the right number of people in here? Because when people come and go, sometimes they get crossed off and you don't hold an open position. So I just want to make sure we have the right amount of people in all of our lines and the right staff and the rosters. But Amber did a ton of work today, so I'm pretty confident, but I just want to do one more look.
One quick question, we said that, our health insurance went down, and I see that FICA also went down because we have decrease in staff salaries, but our staff salary line item went up 17,000.
Well, but you have changes in staff throughout the entire budget, not just there. And then you also have to think about if there was any change in personnel, they may have come in at a lower step.
So your FICA is just one line, Jeff,
Yep.
but if your salaries are all over the place.
They're distributed throughout, so you would have that, you were looking at 17,000 in teacher salaries, but if you were to go down to special ed, and you would see a reduction on page 6. There's actually 11,000, a reduction of 11,000 in the teacher line, a reduction of 71,000 in the para line, so
Gotcha.
it takes all the positions throughout the budget, and then the FICA is applied to that one line.
Gotcha.
And the same goes with the rest of the fringe benefits, it all applies.
Gotcha.
You said for next year, so the retirement is staying at 14 or 21.02. When was the last time that did change?
That changed, we budgeted for that for, I think it was for this year, was the first year that we got hit with this big rate. It's
Way up.
usually typically a 2 to 3 years it will stay at that rate,
Okay.
whether that's gonna be the case, don't quote me, but it will stay the same for next
Do you
year.
remember what it was last year? Yeah.
It was,
Yeah.
It went up a lot.
it was, so certified was like 17 point something.
Okay.
And non-certified was 11.38. I wanna say 11.38, 11.36.
Okay.
It's really sad that I know that.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great.
The other item on page 14 that I've added in is the transfer to food service. Your food service budget is in here, which we can go over. While there is an increase in the transfer amount, there is a decrease to the overall food service budget. It's just a revenue shortfall. We quite honestly don't know where revenue is going to be for food service right now. We don't know how much longer they're going to move forward with the free meals. They are reimbursing us, but they're not reimbursing us to the extent of what the cost of food and everything is these days. We do have a major food shortage. And I know all of our food service directors are very concerned about that. not only is there food shortage, but the cost of food is rising, like everything else. So we've taken that into consideration when you look at the budget. So when you look at the food service budget, you're gonna see that the cost of some of the supplies and food has increased, but the overall budget for them has decreased. You will see that difference on page 15 on line 409. The current budget for this current year is $170,486, and we're proposing $161,918. So I think off the top of my head, it's a little more than 5% difference from one year to the next.
So we're being mandated by the state to provide food for free, but we're not being reimbursed by the state to do that?
We are being reimbursed, but it's not 100% of what we're paying out. I had a conversation with the food service director yesterday, and I think that the reimbursement rate is going to be increasing. I know there's some discussion out there as we speak. When that's going to come into play, I don't know. But there is discussion about that increasing. Hopefully that will cover a little more of the shortfall. But until we know, really, right now, it's kind of a little bit of a guessing game. Those are I have the federal grants on line 407 highlighted because I added it. It's not any different than what we currently have. We need to still refine that number. It takes a little longer to get that figure because we haven't actually applied for those grants yet. So hopefully by the next meeting, maybe I'll have a little bit more information for you. But at this time, I've just budgeted status quo. Any questions on any of that? I have included the rosters. I've also included a default roster. There is only one change between the regular roster and the default roster. And that is because we are proposing to add 10 additional days to the nurse's schedule. So that is the only difference you will see. When you're looking through the roster, the difference is that at the top, I've color-coded the regular roster orange and the default roster gray. And within the default roster, the change that occurs from one to the other, I also color-coded in gray that particular position so that it stands out.
Before we get into questions, Zach, what's the timeline, or what's the timeline on this? When do we need to be moving this by usually?
So the NBC, I believe their anticipated arrival date from us was the first meeting in December. I've notified them at the previous meetings that that may or may not occur. Because the NBC meets on Tuesdays, are always a day ahead of our meetings, which kind of throws everything off for them, in some cases a week. It seems conceivable to me that we'd be buttoning this up in our first meeting in December, and then preparing the budget binders and probably submitting to them for the second December meeting in Tuesday.
So that
No, I think it's the first. 'cause
Yeah, I think if you
December 7th.
if you complete everything in 2 weeks on the first, then I think we could potentially have it to the NBC for the 7th.
For their first meeting.
Unless there weren't, if there's a lot of changes, then it might not, but if you get all your questions and are ready to roll at the next meeting, then we can probably do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably can, and I think there's always that list of questions every year we talk about, so we can probably kill some of those items tonight if we're comfortable with that. And then, if that's the case, review and finalize at our next meeting is conceivable.
One of the big items, two big items that are not included in your packet tonight, that you usually have by now, but because I'm behind, I have not gotten there, are two rather important documents. So one is the revenue projections, which I'll be working on next, and then the tax impact. So I can do the tax impact with the budget, but I need the revenue projection in order to complete the tax impact. So one and two are the same. Once one is done, the other one will be done pretty much the same day. So those two documents are not in your booklet tonight. I attempted to get there and it just didn't happen today.
I think it would make sense though, Zach. I think the budget committee would probably appreciate anything we did have ready. And, you know, we could always give them the budget and say, you know, we haven't voted on our warrant articles yet. We'll bring those to you at the next meeting, but at least they could get the bulk of the information if that's something you're interested in doing.
I think the way we've handled it in the past by presenting the budget with the binder and everything all at once, the warrant articles obviously we can handle separately.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure we're 100% done with the budget. I don't want to have to go back and change it on the fly with them.
Right.
So I'd rather, if we can at least finish the budget, the backup data, so that we can hand them their binders.
Yeah.
And if we need to hold a week to get that done, I'd rather hold a week and submit a complete package than give them a partial. Experience with the budget committee when we've given them partials or incomplete packages hasn't been as positive.
Okay, sounds good.
The other thing I just was looking at, Amber, and I don't know if you did this, but last year our request on the warrant was 15,145, 434. So barring any other significant changes, we're fairly flat across the board in the long run from what we requested last year. Slight increase, but nothing huge.
I'm sorry, was that a question? Or are you just
No, it was
making a
more for a
statement?
reference.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty flat, I mean, it's pretty flat.
You need to do staff increases too for the staff that aren't covered by a collective bargaining agreement.
Okay.
Those
And
aren't in
then
here, and the retirement.
And retirements.
one of the other items that always we discuss is probably, I see you're carrying an 8% increase for transportation.
Yep,
Is that based on that's based on 7 buses, which is what we've used for the last number of years, but it's always the first question because it's low hanging fruit. Does the board want a budget for an additional bus or not?
Could we consult Mrs. Withy on, she's become very knowledgeable about the number of buses we're running and the number of students on those buses.
Our in-house transportation liaison.
Yes. We're running on 6, but that's only because a good number of families still drive their children to school. I can't imagine, that there's gonna be a miracle on 34th Street in terms of getting bus drivers between this year and next year. So if we have 7 buses, it will be amazing and our community can go back to doing what they do and we don't have to have as many families that have to drive their kids to school. So some people might still continue to do that, who knows, but 7 buses, we've been able to it's been very successful with 7 buses. To have to go to 8, first of all, finding a driver for 8, probably not. And I think 7 is where we're at. We were able to get all of our kids to school on 7 buses.
and I know 8 may sound like a strange
Alright,
number,
So
Zach. 8, the reason why I chose 8% is because I wanted to take into consideration that I'm hoping that the transportation companies take a look at, some of the suggestions that we put out there and they increase some rates for their drivers, which in return will probably increase their rate to us. But I'm also taking into consideration the time we're living in and the cost of fuel and everything else increasing. So that's why I went, to 8% in hopes that it comes under that, but a little bit higher than like a 3 to 5.
I'm kind of concerned that maybe we should be estimating a slightly larger increase.
Yeah, okay.
From fuels continuing to climb, labor's getting more expensive, the buses, everything's just up in price. So obviously the cost of the contractors have increased dramatically since the last time they entered into a contract. So I mean, I would propose, although, you know, it's not a huge sum of money, I would propose maybe be carrying like a 12% increase, just in case. But I'd leave that to I think ultimately it's a decision of the board on how they feel on that.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
Okay,
I agree.
I'll do that.
Looking through this kind of quickly, just trying to, you know, going back to the town and asking them for 15 million again, and I know that the common retort is probably gonna be, well, you returned 923,000 this year. I think it's important just kind of going through that budget, looking at, of that 900,000 return, it looks like about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but 250,000 came from transportation, 220,000 came from savings and support programs because of our odd year, and another 400,000 came from savings in the special programs.
That's correct.
So that's 870,000. So it's safe to assume that, I think, and obviously we spent a little more on other line items because of COVID. But I think it's safe to assume that if 2021 had been normal, last year at the normal, we would have actually been
You were close.
close and probably wouldn't have had that surplus to return.
I agree with you.
And despite me saying that, I think we'll still be fighting against that while you return 923,000. But without the savings on those three very large line items, we would have been there.
Absolutely.
And the grant, right, we had a,
In the ESSER and CARES grant, and the supplemental grant. We had 3 very, significant grants that offset some things as well.
can I ask about the oil prices?
Yep.
How confident are you that it's, what you said, $1.06?
I'm not confident. I went off of, because no one will quote you out that far ahead without locking down a new contract, and ours is currently still going on. That's the current rates that we have. So, could those change? Yes. They haven't seemed to fluctuate over the last several years, but times are different right now. So could they? There's a potential.
The legal line, Amber, I'm trying to find my way back to it and I misplaced it.
263.
Can you, oh, I'm sorry, it's line 263?
Yes.
All right, so I see you upped it, obviously from the 10 that had been carried for a number of years up to the proposed 20. Actual last year was just under 16. Do we have, Patty, it's an impossible number to guess, but do you think 20's a sufficient budgetary number, or should we be looking at increasing or reducing it? What's your feeling on this?
I can't imagine what next year will bring, but I certainly hope things are better than this year. I think that based upon your averages, I think I'm comfortable with 20 at this point.
Okay.
And last year's actual was almost 16, we're budgeting 20.
We don't happen to know where that line is currently with the current ongoings, do we?
No, I can check though and let you know.
We may maybe have that for the next meeting, just so we can kind of gauge that line against our actuals for this year so far.
Yep.
And possibly check to see if there's any incoming bills that we can at least try to reconcile against that line to get a more accurate representation of where we are.
Sure.
I think we just got the most recent one in.
We did get bills in, yeah.
So we'll have a good pulse on what 5 months has done.
Yep.
Maybe we can get a better idea of where we think that's gonna go. All right.
Zach, I don't know if you're about to ask this, but we ask this every year. Ms. Withy, is there anything kind of glaring in here that you feel like we could, are there a lot of corners you're cutting here for this budget? I mean, I think the fact that it's fairly flat is a great thing to see, but anything that you would ask for that's not in here that we should be considering?
We kept it as flat as we could, knowing that we were going into a building expansion slash, what, addition slash, we knew that would be huge. And we'd like to see a yes on that, and a yes for our budget. And people absolutely are getting what they need. There's a couple of particular areas that we increased after conversations with certain departments, but for the most part, we just wanted to keep it as low as we could. And I don't think that there's anything that we are needing that's beyond this.
Can I make a note of something? I just want to bring to your attention that, and I think it will be important to note that should your district end in default again, one of the things that will not carry forward is transportation. So the increase in transportation will not be in there because we are ending a 5-year contract. So the only thing that can move forward are contractual items, plus or minus one-time expenses. So because that contract is ending, that amount, whatever the increase is from what we have now to what we potentially are paying, that will not move forward to the default. So I just wanted to note that because it could be a significant amount.
But will what we're currently paying roll over?
But we're currently paying rolls, but anything additional does not.
Could we create a warrant article asking if the default budget is, if our budget doesn't
Yeah, I was
pass?
just gonna ask that.
Yep. A lot of times if you have a larger contract within your school, I have seen and heard of other schools doing just that. And it also allows it to ensure it that it continues forth years following, depending on how many years your contract is, that it automatically will make it in the default moving forward.
Okay. So we're probably gonna want a warrant article around that, is that the sense of the board?
That's what I would recommend.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's a good idea.
Okay. One other item, Amber, if you can roll up to the high school tuition one.
Yeah.
I believe the one student you have at Co-Brown may be at Bow. You have 7 at Co-Brown and 1 at Co-Brown, although I like the other rate, I don't,
No, that is a student that's at Co-Brown.
that's one student at Co, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I know it looks funny, but in order for it to,
It's accurate.
it's accurate. I want to make sure that it ties out to exactly the line.
Okay.
The line 15, the intern stipends, if I think, is what you were alluding to the fact that it's possible that we will no longer be a site.
Well, for next year.
So if that happens, then that line comes out essentially, is that how that works? Okay.
When will you know that, Dean?
That's a good question. Soon.
Okay, so we'll know before we
Yeah.
report to it, okay.
I don't know if you wanna advise us on what to put in the budget so you can see numbers.
Sure.
I can hand that to
So
them.
we-
I only
yeah.
need a couple copies, so. And I didn't put this in the drive, I apologize.
No, that's okay, we typically just look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, you're fine. So this is the estimate of, if you did a pooled increase, what the total would be. So if you wanted, without taking a vote tonight, to just advise Amber to put, X amount of dollars in a pool for increases, we could do that so that it would be populated for the budget, at your next meeting.
Is that something that typically we've talked about that in non-public, Patty?
You can if you want to talk about individual employees, if you want to just say, put 2.5% increase for the people that aren't covered by a collective bargaining agreement, we can drop that amount into the budget. And then if you wanna talk about salary adjustments or individual employees, we need to have a separate conversation in non-public.
And so that list that you just provided is for non-contract staff, correct?
This is everyone that's not covered by a collective bargaining agreement,
Okay.
the amounts.
So, in the past, and I apologize, I don't have that sheet, nor does Andy at the moment. Can you share with us what the dollar amounts, does that sheet have like a 2.5? and
Yep.
a 1.5, or how's that formatted? Can you at least give us the whole dollar amounts?
Do you have grand totals, Amber, or is it
I
just
don't.
by category?
It's by category, but I can add them up.
Okay.
All right, sorry, I don't mean to spring that on you.
No, I should have, when I was sitting here looking at it, I thought I should probably have added that column.
If you have something else you wanna talk about, we can.
Yeah, it might take me a minute, I'm on a little phone calculator.
Well, Zach, are you just looking for the 2.5%, let's say, for the non-certified staff?
Well, you'd have to, it goes for everyone, so Amber has it by category,
Yeah.
but you need to know the total to put in the
I mean,
budget.
you could
So, I
round, I
guess-
suppose you
Yeah.
could round.
Yeah, so is that,
A 2.5% increase isn't necessarily a raise right now with inflation and, every other
right,
cost of living increase that's going on in the world.
right.
So, I'm certainly supportive of that increase. But I also know that for any of those employees, that an increase isn't necessarily an increase at this point. And so I wonder if slightly stronger action should be taken. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I agree with that. So for the non-certified staff, a 2.5% increase would be an additional 433,000 roughly. Right?
No.
Well, no,
Not the
no.
increase, that's their salaries.
No,
no.
These are the-
Oh, that's the,
Here, I'll give,
that's the total. I got-
so
that's the
I would
total.
say for a 2% increase, I'm not gonna include food service, cause that's out of the operating, it's outside the operating. So, 2% would be 16, we'll say roughly 16,000, 2.5% is approximately 20,000, and then, 3% would be approximately 23,000. Approximately, 23.5 or whatever. That's approximately what those are.
I would make a motion to add the 3% to the non-contracted staff lines.
Second.
So that's, and then we'll see what that does to the total budget next meeting.
Yes, should be about a 24,000-ish dollar increase to the overall plus benefits.
No, that includes benefits? That
That's
includes
everything.
benefits.
It did, okay. All
Yep,
right, so it should be
that
about a
did.
$24,000 increase.
Yep, and then the food service, which will be in the food service budget, if we did 3% is approximately, it's 2,400.
Okay, so I would move it for food services. My motion would include the food services, 3%. If whoever seconded is willing to,
Yeah, we did.
okay.
There's also administrators, Zach, do you want to do that as well?
No, that's all.
That's everyone.
That's everybody.
Everybody, okay, never mind.
I just wrapped it all up in one.
I see. All right. Any other discussion about that? We've got a motion that would add 3% to the non-certified administrators and the food service personnel. It's been seconded. All right. All in favor? Gigi?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Zach?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
And I from me as well. And so this will come in next meeting, sort of at the bottom, we'll see what this
Yep,
does.
it'll be pulled at the bottom, like we've done in previous years, yep.
All right, so from my 30,000 foot perspective here, there's nothing else glaring out at me that looks like it needs discussion tonight, at least on my end, or at least for what I'm seeing.
But, so we're hoping that next meeting we'll have any last questions about this, and we'll make any last final adjustments. And ideally, we'll be moving whatever we settle on next meeting.
That sounds reasonable.
All right, any other last questions about budget? All right, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, Amber, thank you for all that hard work.
You're very welcome.
We're moving into policies, we have, I don't know if you want to stay for all this, you're welcome.
Yeah, no, she can go. You're good.
I would like to go, you know.
Yeah, please do.
But I will stay if you like my company.
Thank, we do love your company, thank you. All right, so then moving into policies. We have a number that are at second reading, we tabled them or moved them forward last meeting. I looked at a couple that seem to be sort of timely, like JLCJA, and I wonder even if it's at second reading, whether we should try to act on it. All right. So why don't we just sort of put them all out there? Any thoughts from the board about any of the policies, wanting to act on any of them? You've had a chance to look at them. All right, then I might throw out there in particular, why don't we start with JLCJA? Which is the last one on the list, but perhaps one of the easiest ones to act on, I think.
Are you looking to dispose of that tonight, Nate, or move it?
I would love to dispose of that. I think that there's a deadline in there that talks about having a plan in place for next school year, and so I imagine that our administration would like to get started on that.
So I will move JLCJA as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion in a second. So, Zach, you want to say anything about that? Do you want to?
More want to get it on the board for discussion, and I'm willing to let it go wherever it goes from there, sir.
All right. Okay, so as far as I can tell, this, I think this one had, is this the one we had two versions in? No, we just had the one version.
Yep, the new, yes.
So this is a new policy, we haven't had one.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is, like you mentioned before, there's a new RSA that requires an emergency plan for any sports-related injuries in any school districts that have grades 4 through 12 and is optional for K-3. So you do have grades 4 through 12 in your building, so we need to have this plan and we'll work on it. As long as you see the structure of this policy looks okay, we'll move forward.
Any comments or questions about policy JLCJA?
I mean, just based on quickly looking at it, there are some areas that look like they need to be edited for our school. Who's going to take that on?
Yes, we will do that at the SAU office, yep.
Okay.
Any other? All right, all in favor? Gigi?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Zach?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you. What else? Any, why don't we maybe go back to the top and look at BA. I don't know that the other ones necessarily need to be, have action taken on them. They're only at a second reading. We can put it back one more meeting if we need to. But just out of curiosity, is there a sense of the board? Has anybody had a chance to look at the board evaluation policies, BA, R1 and R2? We've been talking about, for a few months now, the idea of incorporating more of sort of an evaluation aspect, sort of goal setting to our district, and you know, a lot of things like this begin at the top, so this is something you've talked about as an idea. Any thoughts on those policies, the wording, the breakdown of items?
I guess just a comment, you know, look through them a few times, and every time I look at them, it, I don't know how to word it correctly without sounding blunt, but like BAR2, it's like, what's the point? It's like, I don't know an analogy, but it's like buying a treadmill and it can sit in your house if you never use it. Does it do you any good? You know, if a self-evaluation is only as good as what someone's willing to put into it, and so I guess not so much the policy itself, but I would say what's the goal, what's the purpose, and is it actually going to, what's the desired outcome from those self-evaluations, other than internal reflection on how you performed as a board member? Is that what this policy is trying to solicit, is internal reflections on how, you know, we've done as board members, which I guess is important, but also something that I know I do personally, you know, without the policy telling me to do so. That's just kind of my 2 cents and feedback on it every time I look at it.
I know that previously we've talked about some sort of holistic, I call it a 360 evaluation because that's what they use in corporate America. It's like I review, you know, a group, and then they might review me, and then it kind of goes around. I know we've tossed around that idea a little bit. Is that kind of what this, as Jeff has said, is that part of the goal or outcome? Or is this just self-measurement, self-reflection, just for, you know, looking at these and saying, oh, I'm not doing that one, I need to do that? Is that the goal, I guess? That's kind of where I'm curious. Because I'm interested in, like we've talked about, the, as I call it, the 360 evaluation, where everybody reviews everybody and we just kind of collaborate and try to make each other better. Where this is like, you know, I'm scoring myself. So.
I think R1 is about scoring the other board, or the board as a whole, which is a little bit of the other board members, you know, in addition to yourself, but also R2 is just about your self-reflection, like you said. So I think both parts are there in those two policies. DJ, any thoughts?
Well, I probably like Andy, kind of, well, actually, he didn't say whether he was for or against. He just said he was used to doing a 360 evaluation. I think when you're trying to create a culture of feedback, when you're trying to create a culture of, sorry, struggling with words tonight, I think it's a little jet lag. So when you have, when you are trying to create a culture of feedback, because getting feedback to each other is what helps us be better. To me, having a policy in place may be connected with our goal setting. And again, it doesn't have to be this particular document, but I mean, there are things in here that are relevant to all of our work: relationship with the superintendent, community relationship, board meetings, staff personnel relationships. It might be good for us to have that feedback as well from the community, in addition to just a self-feedback. I know this policy is just for our own internal review, but you know, if we expect administration to get feedback from the staff on their work, and we expect teachers to get feedback on their work, then we should also expect to have, you know, feedback or take a look at our work as well. That's just my humble opinion. And I feel like it's a good example, I mean, it's a good avenue for growth.
Andy, to your question, I agree with that, and I think there's no piece, there's no element here to this, these two that we're looking at that basically prescribe how often we should be doing this, or maybe this was, Jeff, your question, how often does it actually happen? Does it just sit there, do we use it? And I would imagine there's another sample policy out there somewhere that basically we could start with that says, you know, we will annually or semi-annually or whatever, as a board, commit to, you know, reflecting or soliciting feedback from, you know, our stakeholders.
Or that could be goal setting.
That could be goal
That
setting.
could be part of your goal setting.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So I think I'm hearing a willingness, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like as a board, we're agreeing that we should be doing some of this somehow. And so maybe the question at the moment is, for our next meeting, we look at these two and we, as best we can, identify the bullet items we want to keep. Maybe we propose if we want to remove any that but I think that might be a first step as in terms of looking at kind of what our job description is as a tool that if we choose to use it in our goal setting, this would be a step we could take. That seems like a reasonable step for next meeting.
Yep.
I mean, maybe some of these we want to get rid of and they're not relevant, but some of them we want to keep. And we can also look and see if there's some other policy to talk about.
I mean, this is just the school boards association sample, so that's, that's not always the ideal. But if you're not interested in adopting this as a school board policy, that doesn't mean you can't use the document. So when we sit down for goal setting, we could have this sample and sort of talk through, how does everyone feel? The first one is relationships with the superintendent, and we just talk through that. And is that an area that we think needs to be a board goal, or is that something that, where everything's fine and we don't need to include that one this year? And maybe community relationships is something that you're interested in focusing on, so.
I think Patty makes it a strong point, which is this seems like something to me that doesn't necessarily need to be codified by policy.
Yeah.
But is probably a best practice for the board, but doesn't necessarily rise to the level of policy in my mind.
Okay.
And that's, I think, probably where I've struggled with it, is I look at it and wonder, why is this a policy as opposed to just, why isn't it just a practice as part of our annual discussions, and part of that goal setting and everything else we do? Maybe this is part of that process.
And then I'd be interested in where we landed on policy BA, which I think was the goal setting and evaluation. I think, Nate, at one point you would propose the amendment to it that talks about, like, we would solicit data collection and review, survey responses, for both the school and town communities, as well as other methods, that the board deems appropriate. So I don't know if they're related or if that moved forward as written, but I see some similarities between, I think, R1, potentially R2, and then, the board's self-evaluation and goal setting.
Right. Did we approve?
I feel like that was approved, but I'll have to check. I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, I'm just looking through documents.
Yeah, I don't remember when that was.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like we'll come back, we want to come back to this next meeting and try to hash out what this.
Do we want to include it as a policy, or do you want to just remove it from the agenda and use it as a guidance document, I guess is the question.
I prefer using it as a guidance document. I don't see the need for a policy on
Okay. All right, so then maybe the question is for next meeting, is anybody else opposed to Jeff's leaning towards removing this from the policy list and just using it as a guiding document?
I know policies put us in positions to make things happen, so I'd probably be comfortable with it as a policy, but if everybody else is more comfortable with it as a practice, then I'll defer just to do it, to be,
You can make a motion.
to get it done,
You wanna make a motion?
to make the policy.
Yeah, to move this?
After hearing the discussion, no.
Okay. All right, then maybe, can we put on the agenda for next meeting, looking at BA and start maybe a goals discussion about how we want to move forward with goal setting? We've sort of been talking around it for a while, but maybe it's time for us to get that on the.
It's either BA or BAA.
Yeah,
There's a bunch of different versions.
Okay,
thank you.
so I'm removing this one
Yeah,
and bringing back BA and BAA. Okay, got it.
although not for necessary review, it's more under
Just
an item.
An item, agenda item?
Agenda,
Okay.
goal setting agenda item, I think.
Okay.
At that time, we can look at BA,
Okay.
or how about that between now and then? And that's assuming that you're okay with it. Whenever was it, a few meetings ago?
Right.
Well, sort of fuzzy recollections here. All right, any other policies we want to act on tonight?
Not necessarily act on BDH, but, you know, I've been, kind of going through the back and forth on the two different versions.
Yeah.
You know. And, you know, there's the policy that we have in place versus the updated NHSBA, policy. And I think the thing that I struggle with is that desire for a dialogue with the board and versus just public comments and not creating a situation that turns into, especially given the vitriol that is in the world right now, but making it very clear, you know, I guess our current policy, you know, under section 5, making it more clear on how citizens could request a dialogue back and forth with the board, if that's something, you know, so they don't have to go plowing through our policies to find it, and creating that mechanism. Because there are at times, I think, constructive conversations that could be had, there's certainly a desire for them when people have questions of us. So, not like Zach likes where it's an emotion that I have or anything to move, but it's just kind of the thought I've been chewing on as I look at the two policies and trying to reconcile a cooperative, productive meeting, but also giving that desire for a back and forth with the town and better communicating that.
Are you saying that one of them serves that goal better than the other? I feel like they both have comparable language about upon request, we can have a dialogue if we, the board, agree to do that.
Yeah, so I mean, our current policy is they may request open dialogue with the school board, but then we don't have any mechanism discussing how we as a board vote to grant that, right? They can request it, but it doesn't say anything about granting it.
Right, it would require a board vote if that request was made. Yeah.
So it sounds like your concern is more about publicizing this rather than necessarily changing the policy, or is it?
Correct. Yeah, one, publicizing it, but two, also, how do we manage that as a board when there's back and forth and not the ability to not speak on behalf of the board, you know? And it's not it's not as easy just as a conversation back and forth because none of us are speaking for the board.
Right.
Do you see that in any of the other districts, or is it always just limited to comments and feedback?
What I've seen is when it's a simple question that the board can use its discretion and say, you know, sometimes it's the superintendent, you know, could you answer that question? So if it's just a simple question, then the board is, you know, kind of by consensus, like, sure, we provide answers, and then people don't have to wait and feel like they didn't get answers to their questions. We can keep track of the questions if we feel like it needs, more time to gather information, and you could maybe put it on the next agenda and just say, you know, if your desire is to answer questions, to be more interactive with the public, you can either, if it's simple, answer it during public comment or come back to it.
And I think, go ahead.
If it's a question like, why did you vote that way?
Yeah, that's different than,
There's no-
Well, that's where I think in our policy we could clarify, because it's, you know, there's a there are facts
and
and
facts and
figures,
opinions.
and then there's emotion. And being able to have a productive conversation and answer people's curiosity versus an emotional based, let's yell at each other because we're both feeling very strongly about something. That's not productive. And it's like, as a board, if we could have a mechanism where, just like we have a time limit, where it's, you know, is this the litmus test of this is something that can be sussed out and discussed, or is it just, why did you do X?
Maybe what Tyler's just saying, if it's answerable by the superintendent, then, you know, then it's a pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
I mean, there are times when it's uncomfortable when someone, you know, is there school tomorrow? Thank you for your input. You know, it's like, you just answer that question, yes.
Yeah.
You know, there are things that are just very simple that you, by having it be a one-way conversation.
Yep.
You know, if it's a yes or no answer, or, you know, or someone's concerned about something and you can say, well, actually, we decided that if you just look at this.
Yeah.
And point them in the right direction.
Yeah, we've had an example. I think one example, earlier on in the year, we had a gentleman come with questions about transportation, and we knew that we were gonna address that later on, but by the time we got to that in the agenda,
They gave up.
they
Yeah.
were gone,
Yeah.
and he was here for quite some time, but
Yeah.
then he left, and I
Yeah.
felt badly. That felt to me like we probably could have answered what we knew about transportation at that point.
So what if we added under section 5 on our current policy, and we don't have to decide this tonight, but something along the lines of, you know, dialogue shall be limited to you're the teacher, help me out here. Shall be limited to, you know, to, I don't wanna say facts.
Or there may be times when the board agrees to answer questions that, you know, we can wordsmith something if that is, you just wanna make it clear that there could be a time when you have a simple question and we might provide an answer.
Yeah, because
Is
there have
basically.
been many instances, like the one Gigi said, where it's like, yeah, we've had a very strict policy, but, and we do occasionally answer them, but it's like we could codify it maybe a little better.
So, and something
So,
about,
right,
go ahead, Zach.
You're muted, Zach.
sorry, Andy, that was you that was jumping in, Nate, so that was Andy's, it's Andy's turn.
Oh, Andy, go ahead.
Cool. I was gonna say in the BEDH proposed policy, in section 5, it says, requests to address the board on specific matters, in short, can be submitted to the superintendent no less than 14 days prior. That would potentially give the board time to either prepare a board response to a submitted topic of discussion. It would be different than if somebody came to a board meeting during public comment, said, what time is it? And Zach or, you know, Patty could say, oh, it's 7:54. You know, so it kind of separates the types of discussion and the topics that people want to have. And if it's maybe 14 days isn't right, maybe it's, you know, before the next school board meeting or whatever, and there's a cutoff, right? So that we have time, just like we do with emails, to review questions that people want to talk about so that, you know, we can prepare for either that conversation. So I don't know if that kind of language would be helpful or if I'm missing the point.
I think Andy's doing a pretty good job of hitting the nail on the head. Well, we've never had anybody necessarily ask for an open dialogue with the board, at least to the best of my recollection. That being said, what we don't want to do is get into a conversation about something we haven't had an opportunity to prepare for, right? So if we're going to get into an in-depth conversation, we need to have an opportunity to prepare for it. So if it's quick yes or no's, absolutely. If the feeling of the board is to dispose of them at the meetings, quick answers, fine. But what I don't want to do is get into a back and forth that turns into a never-ending question and answer session, because there is agenda items that need to be addressed, and the purpose of the meeting is to work its way through the agenda and take care of the items at hand. Certainly, if somebody want to come in and have a long conversation with the board, time can be set aside, and it can be placed on, if it was a week in advance, which is about when the agenda is being crafted, it can be placed on the agenda, and then if there's material that they intend to discuss, and they can provide, copies of what they want to discuss, it gives the board an opportunity to get itself up to speed on what those matters might be. So I think there's a fine line between just desire to deal with the yes or no questions, but the other end of it is we do need an opportunity to have those, to prepare for those longer conversations. So the current policy, when we hashed this out in 2016, we were trying back then to do that. So item 2 on the current policy says that requests to address the board on matters that require more than 3 minutes must be presented to the superintendent at least 10 days prior to a meeting. It must be set forth the specifics of the subject to be addressed. When appropriate, the board may place such requests on the agenda. So I actually think the current policy is realistically fairly straightforward. Number 2 is satisfying what Andy's discussing. Number 5 is really satisfying what Jeff's looking for. I think we just need to maybe be a little more cognizant of those quick questions, and if the board's comfortable with answering them, then we address them during the meeting.
Yeah, I agree with you. 2 checks off the box Andy brought up, and 5. I guess my only thought on that, Zach, is, is it a board policy, or, are we gonna have make someone specifically request, I'm requesting open dialogue, now please answer my question, versus, are we just going to, as a rule of thumb, answer those questions that we can answer at that time?
We can certainly, because it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily differing to the existing policy, we can certainly at the next meeting, open citizens' comments to say brief questions, related to agenda items. Maybe that's a sufficient way to do it, citizens' comments and brief questions related to agenda items. We'll try to answer. And we can go from there.
But there is a line that you cross when you get into a topic where we have 5 different opinions on it. We're not gonna, I would imagine, especially if it's on the agenda and we're going to be hashing it out later in the meeting, why would we take time, that gets into a whole can of worms that I don't know. So does that get codified where that line is?
It defers back to, that particular item's yet to be resolved, that's why it's on the agenda.
Yeah.
And that's the response is, we'll be having a longer discussion about that later on in the meeting. The board has work left to do.
But, so let's just throw the elephant in the room out there, let's say why did you guys have the mask mandate? We've got a 4-to-1 vote on our board with, 1 opinion, 4 opinions, and each of those 4 opinions probably all have their own different reasoning behind coming up with the consensus that we did. So I think I see what Nate's saying is that we can't answer that question other than that's how we voted, right? So I guess we can answer the question, it's just.
Well, the discussion is in prior minutes and in prior videos.
Prior videos, go back and watch the video from 2 weeks ago, and there it is.
Yeah.
Right, so the answer to that question would be, the board's decision was split on that matter. The discussion revolving that decision was 2 weeks ago, and if you watch the video, you can see the board's discussion around that.
Yeah, okay.
That's the answer to that question.
Okay. So,
But if, I mean, we can certainly go to taking that approach, and we can see how it goes, and we can either continue with it if it seems to be going well, or we can pull the plug and resort back to the existing method.
but does that need to be codified or not? It sounds like we're saying no, it does not need to be codified. We'll just sort of tweak it and try it for a little while.
Yeah.
I think it is, I mean,
Think it's in there?
then we get into the like, well, are they requesting open dialogue or are they just asking us a question, right? But I think by its nature, if they're asking us a question, that's requesting dialogue.
Right.
And we just make it clear that some questions won't be able to be answered.
And I think in that case, the one thing we do is we hold the 3 minutes. So it doesn't turn into a 30-minute conversation. And I think that just becomes part of it as we become more diligent with keeping a timer, which we started and seems to be working.
So I would move that we adopt or reaffirm BEDH public participation at board meetings
As it's written,
as it's written,
your current policy.
our current policy.
Second.
Any further discussion?
So I guess I do. So the policy that's in the drive,
It's labeled current, Andy, and it's the PDF, not the Word doc.
okay, because I'm looking at the heading for this document is sample policy, so that's why I was asking.
No, see, that's the draft policy from the NHSBA. This would be the other BEDH policy that's headed with Deerfield School District on top.
Cool.
Approved October 6th, 2016.
Any further questions or comments? All right, all in favor? Gigi,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Zach,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
aye. Reaffirmed. All right. I feel like background investigations was pretty straightforward as well.
Yeah, so I would actually have a comment about that. So the background check, rules changed with this past legislative session and, allows the superintendent now to have a designee, to receive the results, to move the hiring process forward a little bit quicker in some cases. I've been taking care of it to this point, but we do plan to have our HR coordinator trained in how to review and look at the results in the portal that we now have access to. The thing that we've been talking about, that Peter and I have been talking about, and we actually ran it by Dean, was the sample policy, and we talked to School Board Association as well, I should say, requires any misdemeanor to be brought before the board. So in the past, we had some discretion over, I'll give you an example. Someone had parking tickets that in college that added up to an amount such that it rose to an offense and is on their criminal record check, and they're now 50 years old trying to be hired. And so it's, the superintendent's maintained some discretion about, minor offenses, to be able to make that hiring decision without bringing that before the school board and going into non-public session to talk about whether 5 people agree that parking tickets is something that will still allow people to work at DCS. Just wanted to know by consensus if that made sense, if Dean crafted some language, if you would be comfortable with that. Specifying like what the minor.
Which mean that we would not, in your example, we would not have to meet for the 5 parking tickets?
Correct, we would not go into non-public to talk about that because I would have some discretion over minor offenses to say, yes, I would still want you to work at DCS even though you were,
And Dean would think that would still fit in with the new law?
Yes, and Barrett at the School Board Association weighed in on it too. He said that is not a requirement in the law that it go before the board, so.
I'm comfortable with it.
I like that.
Okay,
So are we gonna see like a proposed write-up for what those,
yes.
that,
There are some descriptors in here, but we'll add the language to make it crystal clear. It was an unintended consequence of, they took action because there were some results that were they were like basically plead down. So you would want to look at, they're sort of training us on how to look at background checks now, which is way more than I ever want to know. But you can look for certain offenses, and there are signs that it may have been a plea deal and that it could have been something more serious, and that during the finding they did a plea deal to get it to a misdemeanor, whatever. And those are the things that you want to be more careful of. There are some that are very straightforward about, shoplifting, and you look at the date of offense and they were 18 and now they're 55. And I always called the candidate too, to be clear. We have to call and ask if they want to move forward, and if they do, then they need to discuss what was in their record. It's a pretty thorough process. It's just avoiding that piece of you having to review every.
Yeah. So we're okay with Patty bringing back a slightly updated version next meeting?
Yes.
To look at? Okay,
Sounds reasonable, yeah.
great, thank you. And the one that remains is GBD, board staff communication. That says tabled. Are we tabling that indefinitely while that's being worked on? No, it was tabled last time, and we need to, it wasn't updated.
Wasn't that the one that I added, I added some info, you wanted the policy referenced, wasn't that the one?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
That's not in our drive right now.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not? Oh, okay, then I'll get that in for you.
And I forget what it was referencing, I think you're right.
Yeah, it was just making it clear that, because this seemed to limit the ability for the staff to contact the board directly, so we were just clarifying that there are policies that if they have a complaint that they feel they've been discriminated against or not, that they have a mechanism for that.
Yeah, I think the last meeting I attended, which seems like it was forever ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I basically said like in the footer of some of our policies, it lists like reference this or that.
Yeah.
So I think in this one, we were gonna list, the different policies or procedures that people can use to.
And I did add a reference to a policy, it just apparently did not make it to your drive, so I will get that in there for the next meeting.
Okay, great, thank you.
Cool.
All right, any other policy questions? I think we're all set for this round. Okay, great, thank you. On to informational items and the mask wearing matrix.
Thanks, Gigi.
Yep.
So the board requested, even though you have a motion, approved motion in place of when you're going to look at the mask mandate, the board did request at each meeting that I update the numbers so that you're aware of what's happening. So you are still, the state and the community are still in a substantial level of transmission, which is the first page. The backhand side, I added in the current numbers according to the map in Deerfield are 60 cases, and Bonnie's update as of yesterday were 29 current cases. That changes on a daily basis, and sometimes you hear cases every day and you start to add those up, and you wonder why does it say 29? You just need to keep in mind that after 10 days, students come off the list. So they're quarantined for 10 days and then they're back and 3 more added and subtracted every day. So that's why it's a little bit confusing with those numbers. The percent of population fully vaccinated in Deerfield is at 52.9. And then the data using the CDC calculations, the data was suppressed for quite an amount of time on the PCR test positivity rate, but it is now populated on the state map because your PCR positivity rate is 19.1%. The number of infections per 100,000 is also for the first time published in Deerfield. That's been a suppressed number that we've had to hand calculate. And per 100,000 people would be 2,150 cases per 100,000, so.
Wasn't it 4 was the number we were debating about a few
Yes,
weeks ago?
yes.
All right, 4.5.
So those are the updated numbers.
Any questions, Clemmer, comments? All right, thank you. Number 8, public comments. Anybody from the public still here? No?
No, thank you.
All right. Okay, then, per New Hampshire RSA 91-8:3 to
L.
L, thank you. Look for a motion to go into non-public.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second,
All right, roll call, Gigi,
yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
and yes. We're now entering the non-public.